hosted by Andy Moss. Andy has been in the staffing industry for over 25 years, first as a recruiter, then eventually an account manager and business owner. This is the podcast where we sit down with fellow staffing owners to get the real stories of the successes, the failures, and the lessons learned along the way.
Welcome back to Staffing Stories. I'm your host, Andy Moss, and I've got a special guest with me, Mr. Erik Kessinger, just down the road in Atlanta. Erik and I started recruiting many moons ago about the same time with the same company, and we've kind of grown apart, got reconnected, and I wanted to get him on just to kind of share his story because it's a good one. But Erik is with Legacy Exec Search. It's a new organization for him, and it's been an amazing ride for him. So I want to introduce him to all the listeners.
Hello, everybody.
Erik, for those who don't know you, kind of just give your background, a little bit of story, and then we'll kind of pop some questions at you.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just start with where me and you kind of probably started. You know, you kind of just fall in to this industry, and I won't go through it. It found me. The next thing I know, I'm interviewing here in Atlanta with a company called Aerotech, and
nobody knows that company. Nobody has a clue what Aerotech is.
Aerotech, Allegis Group. So anyhow, it was this big, huge company, still growing, I guess. But anyhow, I spent 5 years at Aerotech. And I think those that maybe either know anything about it, 5 years is a long time at Aerotech. And then a buddy of mine had left Aerotech and then joined a company called Wilgus Group, which was based here in Atlanta. And so I had spent almost 20 years with Wilgus Group, based in Atlanta, and until we got acquired in November of 2021 by Korn Ferry. So I just left, me and same guy that left and recruited me to go over, a guy by the name of Charlie Wilgus. We decided, we've been talking about it for years, but you've got kids, and maybe I wasn't the risk taker, maybe that you were, but, just decided to go ahead and put our own firm together. So it's the two of us and another partner. And so I left in early August, and we just opened up an executive search group called Legacy Executive Search.
A lot of people, question like executive search, like what level, executive search covers a lot, not just like CEOs and presidents and things like that level. Kind of walk, some of our listeners that may not be as familiar with exec search, kind of that whole, the way it lays out.
Absolutely. Well, the transition when I joined Wilgus Group, we were mainly doing contract at Aerotech. But as I started figuring things out, I wanted to go up the food chain. But it is totally a misnomer to think that everything's executive and everything is only C-level, because most of the recruiters that I was working with at Wilgus Group were not doing like what you might define as C-level executive search. That's usually going to be small boutiques, and a lot of times the big executive search. Coca-Cola does not call Erik Kessinger for the next CEO search.
Yeah.
Right. They just don't. So I would define it as, kind of leadership. You start cutting your teeth with the manager, director level. And I had made it a point to try to go up the food chain. So where I started working was for a vast majority of my years is like the middle to lower middle market companies, 200, 300 million and under, but doing, sometimes director, but VP and president level searches. So I did kind of carve and go up that path. And that's what a lot of my searches have been until I got into leadership or management a few years back.
So when you look at, your industry is kind of more in that manufacturing industry also. So you're looking for executive level inside of a product, somebody's building a product.
Exactly. So most of all of my background has been in manufacturing. Then I would add distribution.
Yeah.
So manufacturers, I've done like 15 searches with a company that doesn't manufacture, but they distribute natural stone throughout the U.S. So I had to learn distribution too. But at Korn Ferry, you'd almost call it like industrial.
Gotcha. So attributes to a great recruiter. You and I both were at Aerotech, and we were both very good recruiters, especially in the technical markets. What are the attributes that you see great recruiters have that have been in this industry a while?
Well, I think one is, I think I'm a pretty decent recruiter, but I get worried when recruiters tout themselves because we're in a business that's ever changing. So I've always said to my bosses, the day that I say I'm omniscient or I know everything, you should fire me.
Yeah.
Because I really truly think it's something where you've got to always continuously improve. I see a lot of value in getting older. It's like one of the more unique industries where, when we started in our 20s, I thought 40 or 50, man, those are just old farts, right? Old people. But what you learn is through that is having kids. You learn your empathy level goes up. So you learn quite a bit by just aging, honestly. Yep. And that's actually learned too by just life experiences.
Well, some of the things that I like about recruiters are this instant ability to bond with somebody. I think guy, girl, whatever, just if you can establish a rapport as quick as that first call, you're going to be a great recruiter. But if it takes you 3, 4, 5 calls to win trust, then it's going to be a hard field to plow. Do you see that? I mean, in your business, I mean, you have to, I mean, these guys aren't going to just talk to anybody in the exec field, I'm sure.
Well, I think it's maybe a fundamental belief. I try to treat it. I mean, I placed $10 an hour technicians, back in the day. I don't put myself above anybody. And so with that, I don't care if I'm talking to somebody I talked to a guy the other day that was running a $1.6 billion division for a very big electronics manufacturer. I mean, everybody puts their pants on the same. So that's kind of the way I approach it. And then to your point, Andy, I think the art of what we do is diffusing in short amount of time to get somebody to open up. And that is not it's tough to coach and train. And I just think it's being comfortable in your own skin, right? And just being yourself and getting somebody to talk to somebody, not at somebody. Because I know that part of my transition, when I would be profiling a candidate early on, I just feel like I had these scripted questions and it was just rigid. I would just they weren't rounded. They weren't getting somebody to open up. And to your point, Andy, too, it's you got to be a great listener. So it's the attribute of getting somebody to diffuse, but also just knowing when to let them elaborate and listen.
Well, they'll, identifying red flags, is, they're going to say something that's going to disqualify them or put them in. If you don't interview, like I talk to my recruiters, is like, just interview them. Don't interview them to the job you're looking for. I mean, just find out what he or she is trying to find in their career, because they'll sit there and just probably tell you about your job if they're the right fit. But if you start saying, can you do this? Yes. Can you do that? No. That's like you scripted. So, I mean, it has to be conversational. You have to be able to carry a conversation and just feel the moment.
If I had been told this, here's a good tip, and I train this and would coach this with anybody that I had managed or onboarded. But if you can really understand what I'm about to say, it's if you can get into motivation, meaning what prompted somebody to update the resume. So take me back to the moment. When did you update your resume? What prompted you to do it? You will get a great story with just those two questions right there, which will help you ultimately with motivation when your client asks you, why are they looking right now?
Yeah. There was a triggering moment or that cascaded everything.
Yeah.
So when you look back in your career, walk us through a moment that was probably a bad moment in your career, but turned out to be the best teaching lesson or the best thing for you.
I vividly remember it. And so, I had been probably coached, and this was not maybe at, I can't remember where I was taught this, but I had been taught when it comes to prepping candidates. Never seemed 100% right, but when you prep a first candidate, then second candidate, third candidate, maybe fourth candidate for the same job, I was giving candidates, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unfair advantage to candidate number 2, 3, 4 if you're giving them feedback from the interviews of the first candidate or any of the original candidates in process. So let's just tee it up. That's what happened. I get a phone call from the CEO of a company in Charlotte, and he called me out on the phone, and I owned it. And so the lesson learned was it was an unintentional misgiving to it almost probably felt like I'm trying to give every candidate. I was inserting myself too much into the process when you want to keep the process fair for every candidate. So that was my biggest probably mistake and learned lesson. Didn't lose the client, but I did have to own that mistake, and I never did it again.
Well, there's moments where we all step on ourselves, and you do have to own it. You have to say, hey, and that's what you have to be humble in this industry, because it will humble you in a hurry. Because there's a lot of moving pieces in our work, but that's a great lesson. On the other hand, what is a moment where everything came together and it's like, okay, this 20 years of industry is like, okay, I've not figured it out, but man, I've got it to a point where I understand it.
Whew, that's a good one. I think it's been somewhat recent, because I got into management and got away. I was still doing search, but not in the volume. Where I feel like I've got a network. Kind of goes back to the age topic, right?
Yeah.
We all start, if you did not come from the industry or LinkedIn, just think of the first person that connected with you, and I'm pretty selective. I don't think I've got even 5,000, connections. So I'm usually with full intent. But what happens over time, which I think is just kind of a light bulb moment that to me, I'm proud of, is I've got a pretty darn good network. So you spend all this time doing searches, reaching out to people on LinkedIn. Don't discount the value of your network if you're having meaningful conversations along the way that can help you. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel if you leverage your network to help you.
Well, it's not instantaneous. It's like you're planting seeds that you may not, get back for years. I remember talking to frontline engineers 15 years ago that are now, I'm looking, oh man, he's a plant manager, and they remember who I am. And it's just, it's great, because I've treated everybody. I don't care if I got you a job or not. Hopefully I helped a little bit in your, resume development or your thoughts about interviewing or search, because, they're going to be still be in the industry. They'll come, they'll remember your name as a recruiter that helped them or didn't give them 2 hours of time.
Well, just as an example, me and my partner are going up to Cleveland tomorrow for 3 days, because a guy that I talked to, he's let's call him a private equity CEO. I just had a good conversation with him a long time ago, and I kept touching base with him, even though I never placed him.
Yep.
And he called me a couple of years ago, and we did 2 or 3 searches with him just because of a meaningful conversation a number of years ago when he told me he wasn't interested in the search that I was conducting. So it all comes full circle. And if you think about it, Andy, me and you developed a relationship, and we can catch up like that because of the same thing, networking, where you would call me or I would call you to see who you might know for a search.
Yep. And you have to be willing to give. Great recruiters are very giving with their time and energy. And when I say that is, individuals you recruit want some information. They need that information to make a decision. And if you're a recruiter that keeps everything real private, like I can't give you that name yet, or that's not, and I understand some people say, well, don't give them the client name. Today's world, you can kind of get to what that is. But man, I was successful by saying, okay, I'm recruiting for this type of company, and I never held back. They asked me a question, I answered it. And they may not like my answer, but they're never going to say I was not truthful with them. But if I started throwing up walls, that was when things broke down.
Well, to your point, how can we expect somebody to open up if we don't do the same in return? So to your point, Andy, the more you feel comfortable, I just haven't had somebody go snake a client or just go, and it's happened, but I will tell you, it is few and far between over 25 years. Yep. And so that is one way to diffuse by that openness. And I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Well, you're hopefully working for a client that's freaking awesome. And you want to be able to say, okay, this is a Fortune 50 or a Fortune 10, because that's what our clients are hoping we're doing, is selling them. But if we're so private and we're not giving, like going back to the question, like giving of information, and being able to understand where you're recruiting them to, what's the city like? What are the schools like? Because some of us, quite frankly, just start jumping on the phone with people and we don't know 2 squats about the company we're recruiting for. And great recruiters will at least do some homework before they start jumping on the phone.
Yeah, there's a fine line, right? There's those that we know that have to have all the information, have it buttoned up. I've always said all we have to be is like an inch deep. And I'm probably the least handy person I know in the state of Georgia. And I could probably lob my name over in the state of Tennessee. And we placed engineers. Yeah. But I didn't need to know how to turn the wrench.
Exactly. But you at least need to know the company builds tractors. When someone asks, what does this company do? And if your answer is, you know what, I don't know. Well, that doesn't really establish that you're very confident in what you're doing.
So, exactly.
So when you look at our industry and where it's going over the years, being in it as long as you have, and you and I have gray hair because of this industry, where do you see our industry going?
I go back and forth. I've been trying to learn AI. I've got to put together, I want to update and refresh my bio. So I'm using AI. Have I not watched shows, and do I get worried that AI can maybe take a segment of what we do? But I still believe that there's a personal touch that a computer program or an algorithm can't really touch, and that's tone, inflection, and some other things. So I don't think from an industry standpoint, you'll watch things and you'll think that we're going to be obsolete in a couple of years. And I don't believe that. I also believe that, we've got a workforce that continues to age, right? Yeah. And there's a big void in certain skill sets. You just got to be ahead of the skill sets in the industries that are going to be, pretty hot. And so I'm completely positive on where our industry is going.
I'm not as worried about the AI, outbreak. When I say outbreak, that taking our job like you, but it will make a good recruiter a great recruiter. and it will make an average, below average recruiter a good recruiter because of the time savings, the grammar, the being able to put together, submittal notes, or, write me a text, for this job that I'm recruiting for. Because that, I think, is the automation of that's going to be incredible. Our industry is growing. It gets bigger and bigger. But, it's changed from when me and you sat in that seat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, big time. I mean, we didn't have LinkedIn Recruiter.
No.
Right? I mean, we just used to have, and so I'm not going to go old school on you, but I even get on myself sometimes for not picking the phone up. But people are going to screen, because I screen anybody that calls me.
Yeah.
You got to be creative, and there's multiple ways to communicate and connect with potential candidates. So anyhow, this isn't an exercise to go into all those techniques, but at the end of the day, we're not going away.
So as we wrap up, I always kind of ask my guests a couple questions, and the one that's kind of interesting is, if you're streaming a show right now, what are you streaming? What's your go-to shows?
That's good. Oh, well, the best show I've probably seen, I've watched in a number of years, is Gangs of London.
Huh.
So if I'm not watching football, which I pretty much watch all football, and I'll stream it and what have you, but I guess since you're asking me, and it's top of mind.
Yeah, that's good.
Gangs of London.
So when Tennessee comes down to Georgia this year and we win, what's that night look like when you take a L?
It's going to probably look like what happened to you guys when you played Florida.
We'll just end it right there. Eric, I can't talk too much about my volunteers, but just get used to Rocky Top.
No, and it'll be. I went a couple of years ago. I think it's gonna be a heck of a game, and going away anytime playing away anytime in the SEC.
Yeah,
going down to Gainesville is not easy. So I'm just kidding. It's
football is a religion here in the Southeast.
It certainly is.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your week to for you and I to catch up and just kind of lay some wisdom down, especially when it comes to the recruiting in our industry. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning into the episode. Staffing Stories is brought to you by 3D-IQ. We are the future of staffing sales. Our solutions are designed to supercharge your sales and 3x placements, all without ever leaving Bullhorn. Direct market, deliver talent, and drive sales with our all-in-one tool designed for the modern recruiter. Visit 3diq.com/stories to learn more. Find Staffing Stories on LinkedIn, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.